Hi there. Welcome back to my Mortal Kombat series overview thing. I'm going through all the games and talking about what they did and how they got made and all that shit. If you missed part 1, it was about Mortal Kombat from 1992, and this one is going to be about Mortal Kombat 2, the 1993 video game. How about that? Mortal Kombat 2 is, get this, the sequel to Mortal Kombat. It's pretty much an upgrade in every possible way. Better graphics, smoother gameplay, more options, more characters, a better soundtrack, and much more story. The game is both darker in tone, with a bunch of scarier backgrounds and fucked up looking characters, but also sillier, with more slapstick finishers and funny sound effects and stuff. Personally, I think this is a sweet spot for Mortal Kombat aesthetics. I like the way the colors pop, and I like every background. I think this is the one I played the most when I was a wee lad. So maybe I'm biased, but I know for a fact that I owned Mortal Kombat 2 on Super Nintendo, and I played it a lot before I may have played some of the others. Also, they definitely found the goofy shit knob for 2, but they playfully kind of turned it to a 5 or 7 range, rather than cranking it all the way, as they might have done later. I'm not sure, we'll get to that later. So like I said in my last video, I think this might have been my intro to the series. I remember these specific versus screens, and I remember the Living Forest stage, I remember the ground freeze, I remember lots of other stuff that was introduced here, and I know that I had this on Super Nintendo when I was little, so I remember playing it quite a bit. I remember that I beat Shao Kahn at least once, and probably multiple times, because I was a badass. I don't want to repeat myself too much, so I'll just say I had this, and I was kind of a troll when I was like 4 years old. So that's about my background with Mortal Kombat 2. We did go through a no video games period in our house, so I didn't get to play stuff for a while, and then I ended up buying the Midway arcade treasures for the GameCube sometime in the early 2000s, so that had Mortal Kombat 2. I got reacquainted with it. Alright, so let's get into the development and background kind of stuff. Immediately after the first game came out, they started talking about actually doing a Star Wars game. Mortal Kombat 2 wasn't on their mind, but then Old Man Midway strolled up again, and he was like, "What the fuck are you talking about making a Star Wars game? You gotta do Mortal Kombat 2. Sequels sell like fucking hotcakes." And so Boone says that they never even thought of doing a sequel at first. So I guess that answers my question about whether the Liu Kang ending was considered canon or not. Probably wasn't. I guess the original's endings were all their own unique stories, but when they got the memo that they were going to make a second MK, I guess that made them decide on the story, and Liu Kang ended up being the winner. So Ed Boon and the gang, which was the same people, who was Boone, who was John Tobias, who was Dan Forden, who was John Vogel, and now there was also one other guy in the credits, Tony Goski, who will be prominent later. They got to work on a sequel. They had a lot of ideas left over from the first that they couldn't really fit in, so they worked on shoving it all in here. They had new equipment. They also sprayed down the actors with water to make them all look glistening and sweaty and hot this time, and the extra fidelity provided by the camera made the graphics stand out better. They touched them up a little bit, and they made them look really, really nice against these backgrounds. A lot of people at the time thought, well, this is photorealistic. Graphics will never get better than this. It's reality. Which we might laugh at now, but at the time you have to consider that this is just a few years after games looking like this. So you might see how people might think that. So when they were developing this was right in the midst of the huge hype of the console releases of the first game. So Mortal Kombat hype was all around them, so they wanted to make the game bigger and better in every way that they could. They have scrolling backgrounds, they have all these new special moves and fatalities and special interactions and stuff. They had more than one lady, which was a feature at the time, so that was pretty special. Basically, they did what they set out to do. They improved pretty much everything from the first. Alright, so playing Mortal Kombat 2, you'll notice that it's basically like the first, but faster and smoother and with more moves and cooler stuff. It's still a 5-button game, it still has the kicks and punches you're used to, but combos were expanded on, and juggling was a feature rather than being a bug this time. Uppercuts and roundhouses still fuck you up, and even more than they used to. Blood goes flying everywhere, and it just feels better and tighter to control. There aren't really any super features or extra meters or any of that stuff, but for some people, this is kind of the sweet spot of classic Mortal Kombat as well. I think that it's the best aesthetic, and it's still a little simplistic compared to games that come out today, but it's still fun to go back and experience Mortal Kombat 2. The arcade mode was pretty similar and could still be interrupted by a second player like before. The latter is like the last one, but the endurance matches are taken out and the bosses are different for story reasons. There was also no minigame in Mortal Kombat 2. There was no test your might in this one, but what it does have is better tracking of your win streak and the kind of finishers you've done and all that kind of stuff. Fatalities were an area that was way expanded upon, and now everyone has at least 2 of them. The team started getting some wild ideas, and Boone had to start turning down some of them for being too wild for 1993. A lot of them have gone on to be used since, but there were still some things that were even too gruesome for today's games. Now, the original had 1 stage fatality, but 2 gave you more ways to interact with the background. You could knock people into spikes on the ceiling, you could knock people off a cliff again, or you could knock people into a pool of acid. In addition to the fatalities, everyone got a couple of joke finishers that were made in response to the controversy surrounding the ultra-violent deaths in the first one. Babalities were introduced, which is just a way to turn your opponent into a baby. And there were also friendships, which lend themselves well to the game's more silly tone. And also, just like the original's stage fatality was kind of unrecognized, Mortal Kombat 2 has an unrecognized animality. Liu Kang morphs into a dragon in this one, and this is where he finally learns to do a murder. Although he still has his little punchy, kicky, whatever thing as his second fatality. The sounds and the music and stuff were all handled again by Dan Forden, and I have to say, he really outdid himself here. While Mortal Kombat 2's soundtrack has never really been something I've listened to a bunch outside of the context of the game, it really does fit the game and lend itself well to the tone. The dark, echoey booms in the background are more foreboding, and the synths really kick ass, and Dan has a little fun cameo here too. If you do an uppercut, he'll sometimes pop up in the corner and say, The sounds of Raiden's teleport and Sub-Zero's ice are pretty iconic, and I could pick out the sound of Scorpion's spear anywhere. Speaking of Scorpion's sounds, I don't think I said, but it's Ed Boon who says, and so he does that in Mortal Kombat 2 again, and for the rest of the series, it's always Ed Boon saying Scorpion's lines. And do you remember Steve Ritchie, the pinball guy who coined the name Mortal Kombat? Well, he ended up delivering the dopest announcer voice of any fighting game ever. I don't know, there are some pretty good announcer voices out there, but this one is definitely in the running. Listen to this dude speak.
Fight. Flawless victory.
Damn, man, that's pretty
Superb.
good. There was, of course, controversy surrounding Mortal Kombat 2, but it wasn't as notable specifically with 2, it was kind of just the series as a whole. So whatever I said in the first one about controversy, that kind of just continued and was expanded upon in Mortal Kombat 2. The ESRB wasn't officially established until 1994, so there was a little notice on the packaging for the console releases saying you might not want to buy this for your children. So after the game was released, a funny thing to me, maybe not to them at the time, is that Mortal Kombat was so popular, people started busting open the machine and stealing the motherboard so they could play it at home. They had to add security panels so people couldn't rip them off. So the cabinet was released in 1993, but there were a few revisions because there were some bugs, and so 1994 is when it really hit the big scene. And then, just like in the first one, September 13th, 1994, which was called Mortal Kombat Tuesday, this is when Acclaim made the console releases, and this time, because the SNES version of Mortal Kombat 1 sold way less than the Genesis or Mega Drive version, 3-1 or 5-1, I'm not sure, but it was really underselling, so Nintendo decided to let them just show the blood. There was a warning on the box, but the game had blood on by default. This time, the SNES sold way better. Something I didn't know was that there was online play on Super Nintendo. What the fuck? There was something called X-Band? I had no idea. I just found this out now. So it came out on everything again. Super Nintendo and Genesis were the big ones. It had Game Boy. It had Game Gear. They were missing characters and stuff. Par for course. Something that I also have never seen in person was the Japanese release, and from what I understand, the blood was turned green and the game went to grayscale for fatalities. I'm not going to track this one down. I've seen some footage. It has like sprite scaling and some kind of neat looking things, but it's really expensive. It's like a collector's item. Alright, so let's talk about this story. It pretty much picks up from where the last one left off. We do find out that Shang Tsung was with Goro 500 years ago, and that he was pretty much an agent of chaos. Then we find out that Liu Kang was the canonical winner, and wait a minute, that's not where I fought him. Anyway, Shang Tsung fails, and he whooped his ass, and Goro died, and all that stuff, so he's on the chopping block. He's getting a stern talking to, and he's gonna lose his head, but he somehow convinces his boss to give him a second chance, and so Shang Tsung has lured people into Outworld this time to fight his boss, Shao Kahn. This is the first time we're hearing about Shao Kahn, and he's this like ultimate badass, bigger than Shang Tsung ever was. And Tobias, who was creator of Shao Kahn, said this was supposed to be kind of like a Darth Vader to the Emperor reveal, kind of this darker, lurking evil power in the background that you kind of knew about and now you're learning more about in the sequel. So the story being set in Outworld allowed the stages in Mortal Kombat 2 to get a little weirder and otherworldly. Outworld wasn't fully fleshed out yet, but we do see a lot more dark and creepy imagery this time. The most kind of normalist looking one is maybe the armory. It's got a bunch of weapons in the background and like some lava around the trim or something, but it's kind of normalish looking. The dead pool is a bit creepier with a pool of acid that works as a stage fatality. The living forest was always my favorite as a kid. I always imagined these trees being able to eat a guy. Also, this here is Ed's face. I never knew that. The pit returns with more spikes and a new perspective for its fatality. There are also these two dudes back here. The portal, to me, is kind of the weirdest looking one, with this cool red cyclone in the background and these floating Shadow Priest guys. People also thought that you might be able to play as one of these cloak guys if you did some secret codes or something, but you couldn't. The combat tomb is also kind of normalish except for these skulls and the red sky and these flying creatures in the background. The tower is cool with its clouds rushing by and another cloak man. Wasteland is also really awesome looking and it has this purple sky in the background. And then Shao Kahn has his own arena where we can see the missing characters, Sonya and Kano. You can also return to Goro's lair from the first one to fight the secret characters. So ideally, you'll mostly be playing MK2 with a friend, but again, the main content of the game is the arcade ladder, and holy shit is the AI in MK2 a bastard to deal with. They pretty much cheat and have to be cheesed to be beaten. There's a fairly easy trick of jumping back and using like Baraka's blades or something over and over and over again, but that's not really fun. And there are also a lot of moves and finishers that are like a single button charge for 4 seconds to like 30 seconds for some fatalities, and I would swear that the AI cheats and doesn't have to obey the rules of those either. There are videos out there of people beating the game on 1 credit, so it's possible with luck and also a lot of memorization of patterns. You can spam sweep kick a lot, and I even beat Shao Kahn using this cheap jump trick here that didn't feel very good. It makes specials and other kind of tricks kind of pointless, and it's not really fun to play in single player. One of the first changes you'll probably notice when you boot up the game is the expansion of the character roster. Remember, the first only had 7 playable characters, and the sequel nearly doubles that with 12. While Kano and Sonya are excluded, we do see them in the background, but they're chained up here. They were the least picked characters from the first, I guess. So, anyway, we do see several new people. Among the returning characters are Liu Kang, who is still played by Hosam Pak. The Shaolin were killed, and he goes to Outworld to seek vengeance. He's not a little wuss anymore, so he can do fatalities now. He does his standard fireballs, and he also has this bicycle kick that I used to mimic the sound of all the time. Johnny Cage in 2 is still played by Daniel Pesina, and he's still an actor. He's joining Liu on his quest to Outworld. I forgot to mention this, but I guess it is important that all his specials have this like green energy to them. So he does this shadow kick, this lifting thing, he throws these energy balls, they're all green. Raiden, who is still called Raiden with a Y on consoles, he's here to stop Shao Kahn. He still has his teleport, and he can shoot lightning like before. He has this new move where he can get up close and grab you and zap you. And he also still does his fly move, and I used to mimic this sound effect all the time too. Scorpion plays about the same. He's still played by Daniel Pesina, and in his story we see that some of the endings were canon and some were not, but his was canon because we see that he killed Sub-Zero, and he's confused because Sub-Zero is back in this one. But then his palette swap, Sub-Zero, is also here, and we see that in his canon he was killed, so what's he doing here? Well, it's his goal to kill Shang Tsung again, so it seems that the Sub-Zero ending was non-canon because Sub-Zero failed, and they sent a new assassin who is said to be the younger brother of the first. This is Kuai Liang. Then we have returning characters who are now playable for the first time, including Reptile, who was, remember, the secret green palette swap. Now he has a story, and it's that he's Shang Tsung's personal bodyguard. We also see Shang Tsung as a playable character now, but he's young and spry and hot, unlike the floaty, decrepit old man in the first. He's played this time by Philip An, and he's still a sub-boss. He's always before the penultimate fight, but he's been downgraded quite a bit from his previous status. Now we have the new people. Baraka is another Richard Divisio, who was Kano in the first one. He's here. He's called, in this one, a mutant nomad from Outworld. And the game points out that he's the one who fucked up the Shaolin Monastery that Liu Kang's from. Then we have Kitana. She's a female ninja who is an assassin for Shao Kahn, but there's a hint in her introduction that she might be helping the Earthrealm people. Then we have her twin sister. This is called the twin because they're a palette swap. She's also played by Catalin Zamiar. She's a pink palette swap. And Melina is keeping an eye on her sister, and it says that she also has her own plans. We have Jax, who, interestingly, he was originally going to be the character that Sonya ended up being in 1, and he was going to have the name Stryker. Anyway, they used this character, gave him the name Jax. He's played by John Parrish, and he comes to rescue Sonya from Outworld. We have Kung Lao, who's played by Anthony Marquez, and also Kung Lao and Liu Kang were in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3. Fun fact. Kung Lao is a Shaolin monk, and he's a friend of Liu Kang. Remember, in the first one, they talked about this great Kung Lao, so this is a descendant of the great Kung Lao. His goal here is to avenge his ancestor's death, and also avenge the destruction of the Shaolin Temple. Then we have our non-playable regular characters, Kintaro, who is the replacement for Goro. He's also stop motion like Goro was. He's Shao Kahn's bodyguard. And he always is the penultimate boss. He comes right before Shao Kahn, just like Goro did with Shang Tsung in the first one. And then Shao Kahn, who is played by Brian Glynn. He's the Emperor of Outworld, and he wants to conquer Earthrealm any way that he can. He's the final boss of the game, and he's pretty cool looking. The funny thing about the details on these characters this time is, it's a weird setting, so they wanted to go weirder, but the way that they accomplished this was just to walk into like a party city or something, and they got like fake nails and a bunch of spray paint, and they put masks, and they made them look weird. But now this cheap plastic stuff made these really iconic characters that are now rendered in 3D, and they put in films and stuff. It's pretty crazy that it started out that way. Alright, so the next thing the game added a ton of was secrets. So, in the original, we talked about how Reptile was a secret fight after meeting specific criteria. Mortal Kombat 2 ramped this up quite a bit with not 1, but 3 secret characters to find and fight. First, here on this portal stage, if you hit someone and get Dan to come out with a toasty, you have to input down and start to fight a new guy who's called Smoke. He's basically Scorpion. He's just a smoky dude. Look at the wording here before each of these characters comes out. Mortal Kombat 1? Huh? Next, you might have seen on the arcade ladder, there's always this question mark block here, and you'll find that you'll cruise right past it usually. But if you fight the fight before that one using only kicks, you'll be able to fight Jade. She's a green kind of katana. You can see her peeking out from behind the trees in the Living Forest sometimes too. She'll sometimes pop up throughout the game and give you special clues and hints like Reptile did in the first one. She'll give some cryptic messages like, Hornbuckle who? And then this third guy is after your 50th consecutive win in multiplayer, you get a chance to fight Noob Saibot. In Mortal Kombat 2, he's just a kind of undefined shadow. As far as I know, he doesn't have a backstory here, so we don't really know who this dude is. But spoilers, he's dead Sub-Zero from the first game, Bihan. I don't think they made this bit of lore yet. I could be wrong, but I don't think that's mentioned anywhere here. He might have just been a shadow guy, and then they expanded on that later. But here's what I'm talking about with some goofy shit. Remember the two big names of the creators? Boone and Tobias, right? Now, watch this. Look at the letters of Boone and Tobias, and flip those around. Yeah, his name is a big joke. Now, I'm not some old boomer who's gonna sit here and complain about how the internet ruined everything, but I am gonna say that it did kind of ruin secrets for sure. You have to admit that discovering secret characters and seeking out tidbits of random knowledge and stuff like that is way cooler than what you do today. Today it'd be like, whoa, you unlocked fucking Trimmer? He's playable? No way! And he'd be like, yeah man, all you have to do is pay the requisite $15.99 for the Combat Pass. I mean, you have to know that he's in the game, right? He's just grayed out on the menu. How could you not know he was in there? I think the old way is way more mysterious and cooler and better. But, you know, some of these rumors could get out of hand and lead you to waste a lot of time and money and frustration. Even in the first entry, people were reading clues left around by Reptile and trying to figure out other secrets that weren't necessarily there. This was exacerbated by magazines like EGM and Game Informer, who would print April Fool's jokes or letters from fans who said they found new shit. One of the famous examples is in the first game, there was an audits menu, and it showed these things called error macros or Max, which people assumed was the name of a secret character. It was not. Without modern context, this was 100% false. This was not at all a character in the least bit. But some magazines said it was, and people were all the rage trying to find this secret Ermac character. There was also the rumor of Nimbus Terrafox? I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but he was reported at EGM. And there was also this character called Emerald, who was like a Super Jade, reported by Game Informer. And there were also reports of this red girl ninja called Scarlet. That's just ridiculous. Some of these sound really silly, and you'd be thinking, how could people be fooled by this? Well, look at what was real. Noob Saibot? You're telling me that's real? The names of the creators backwards, that's a character? Okay, buddy. Well, as Mr. Holmes says, when something seems bonkers, whenever you've made the improbable possible, the other stuff that seems improbable must be the truth too. Or something like that. People also saw this Liu Kang sprite in the back here and guessed that you could play as this dude, who everybody started calling Hornbuckle after some name in the special thanks section of the credits. There was also another Liu Kang back there on the right that people used to call Torch, but people now call him Blaze because of copyright reasons, and he was also not a playable character, but a lot of people said that he might be. So I'm gonna have to make a decision on what and what not to include in these as we get more and more characters and details in the story, but I think I'll go over at least briefly each ending here too. So first, Sub-Zero is revealed to be the younger brother of Mortal Kombat 1 Sub-Zero. I guess he kills Shang Tsung because it says he accomplishes his task. Then he finds out about Scorpion's vendetta against him, but he just says, I'll find out in Mortal Kombat 3. Baraka's ending sees him going berserk, and he and his race of mutants rise up and make him the king of Outworld. Jax rescues Sonya, but doesn't get Kano. Johnny Cage makes the greatest movie ever made and says that the sequel is inevitable. Scorpion sees that this Sub-Zero is not the same Sub-Zero before, and so he becomes like this guardian of Sub-Zero in his ending, and they keep hinting at this third tournament, so I guess at this time they knew that they were going to do Mortal Kombat 3. Reptile, in his ending, turns against Shao Kahn and Shang Tsung, kills them, and then lives on peacefully with his, weird lizard race. Kung Lao has kind of a nothing ending. He just avenges his ancestor's death and then awaits more. Raiden kills Shao Kahn, kills all his minions, and then destroys the portals that go to Outworld. Mileena finds out that she's not actually Kitana's sister, but like a weird botched clone, and so she takes over, and she and Baraka decide to rule the world together as king and queen. Shang Tsung's ending is that he betrays Shao Kahn, and then he unleashes like this horde of demons into Earth forever. And his is like Raiden's in the first one. It says, "Have a nice day." Isn't that kind? Kitana's ending also has her learning that Mileena is not her sister, but a weird botched clone. And she also learns that her parents were the old rulers of Outworld, but that they were killed. So she takes over, she kills Shao Kahn, and she restores Outworlds to its former glory. And canonically, Liu Kang gets super pissed off, kills Shao Kahn, and then he goes back to the Shaolin Temple. Then he realizes that this was all part of his destiny. And with that, I'd say that's another one wrapped up. So, for Mortal Kombat, the original, I had to justify my recommendation quite a bit. I think that Mortal Kombat 2 is still very much fun today. I'd happily sit down and play some Mortal Kombat 2 with someone right now. It's not super flashy, but it's a lot less janky, and like I said, I love the aesthetic of it. It was even more the shit than 1, and I think they're 2 for 2 so far. They haven't made any bad story decisions, and all the characters they added are pretty cool for the most part. They haven't had any missteps, at least not yet. So, with all of that said, I think we have a new number 1. Yes, Mortal Kombat 2 sits at the top. It's the best in the series up to this point. Sorry to Mortal Kombat 1992, you're the worst game on the list now. Check back next time as I continue through the series with Mortal Kombat 3. You can continue to do the YouTube stuff, that would be really great. It's really spurring me to keep making more content. I know I'm just starting, but I really appreciate the likes and the subs and the comments up until now. They do make me feel good, and having conversations, I'll reply to as much as I can. Thanks for watching again, and see you next time.